My name's Daniel Mercer, and I don't know how to start this except to say that Grayvale Hollow isn't on any map anymore. Not really. If you try to look it up, you'll find a note about a chemical accident, an evacuation, a few paragraphs of sanitized government text. But that's not what happened. I was there. I watched it happen. I lost everything inside that fog. And if I don't write this down, then it's like none of it was real. And the people I watched die will stay buried in silence. It didn't begin like the end of the world. That's the part that still haunts me. It was just another boring Sunday. Cold, gray skies, the kind of air that smells like wet leaves and carries a bite of frost. I was in the garage fixing a loose outlet while Claire made pancakes. Emily, our 10-year-old, ran through the house with that stuffed rabbit she wouldn't put down, making little squeaky voices and trying to drag me into her game. I remember thinking, this is safe. Our little bubble of normal. Grayvale Hollow was that kind of town. Suburban quiet. The loudest thing you'd hear was someone's lawnmower or a car door slamming. That morning, I could see Mark Henderson, our neighbor, ex-military, always stiff and sharp, trimming his hedges with that same precision he brought to everything. Old Mr. O'Connor sat on his porch across the street, wrapped in his jacket, staring at the road the way he always did, like he was waiting for something that never came. Jenny, our babysitter, came walking up a little later, earbuds dangling around her neck, scrolling on her phone, rolling her eyes at me when I teased her about being glued to it. Nothing felt wrong, but I don't know. Maybe my body knew before my brain did, because when I went to grab a drink of water, I tasted something strange in the air. Metallic, like biting on a coin. Claire coughed a little while she was flipping pancakes, said it was just the dry weather, but I saw her eyes water. By late morning, the air was heavier. Clouds sagged low. The wind, which usually rattled the last of the autumn leaves, just stopped. And then Emily tugged my sleeve and whispered, "Daddy, it's too quiet." She was right. No birds, no cars on the distant highway, not even the usual barking from the Hendersons' dog. Just nothing. That's when every phone in Grayvale Hollow went off at once. Loud, shrill, mechanical. My cell, Claire's, Jenny's, even the TV in the living room cut from cartoons to a buzzing screen. The old radio in O'Connor's garage screeched. Everyone stepped outside in confusion. The voice was flat, robotic, and it made my stomach knot up the second I heard it. Emergency alert. Chemical plant malfunction. Shelter indoors immediately. Do not attempt to evacuate. Repeat, shelter indoors. Do not attempt to evacuate. The words looped over and over, drilling into us. At first, I almost laughed. Some glitch, some mistake. But then I saw Mark stop mid-trim, hedge clippers limp in his hand, his jaw clenched. Jenny froze, pale, tugging her earbuds off like they might help her hear better. Even O'Connor, who hadn't moved from that porch in weeks, suddenly sat up straight. And then came the smell, stronger now, sharp enough to burn the back of my throat, like bleach, like paint thinner, like something that didn't belong in the air. My eyes stung. I looked up the street, and that's when I saw it. Rolling down like a tide, hugging the pavement. At first glance, it looked like fog, but it wasn't right. It moved heavy, like it had weight, clinging to every surface. And it hissed. Not loud, but a faint seething sound, like water boiling somewhere far away. Two teenagers who'd been sitting in a car at the corner got out, laughing nervously, pointing their phones at it. They covered their mouths with their sleeves, pretending it was a joke. One of them shouted something I couldn't hear, then he bent over coughing, a wet, ripping cough that sounded wrong. The other tried to help, but he dropped too, gagging, clawing at his throat. Their skin changed while we watched. Red blotches spreading, blistering, bubbling like oil on a pan. One of them tried to scream, but it came out as a bloody wheeze. They writhed for maybe 30 seconds, and then they stopped. The smell hit us harder, sweet and chemical, like burning plastic mixed with rot. Someone screamed, and that broke everything. Doors slammed, mothers dragged kids by the arms. A man sprinted across the street, tripped, and barely got inside before the haze reached him. Mark shouted at his wife to get inside while he hauled plywood toward the windows. Jenny stumbled into our doorway, eyes wide, gasping, "What the hell is that?" Claire didn't even need to say anything. She just ran for the closet and came back with blankets and duct tape. We'd seen the same survival guides everyone had, the same movies. Seal the windows, seal the vents, seal the cracks. I grabbed the tape with shaking hands and started working on the front door. The alert was still screeching from my phone on the counter. Same words, repeating endlessly. I risked a glance out the front window. The fog had swallowed the end of the street. O'Connor was gone from his porch. Mark's face was red with sweat as he hammered plywood over his windows. The haze pressed against glass, against wood, like it was testing us. My lungs already burned just standing there. Emily clutched her rabbit, staring at me with wide eyes. "Daddy, what's happening?" I pressed my hand against the cool glass. The fog pressed back, sliding along the pane like something alive. "I don't know," I whispered, "but we can't go outside." The neighborhood was silent now, except for the hiss of the fog and the muffled echo of the alert. The teens' bodies were still in the street, blistered and twisted, skin hanging loose like wax. No one moved to help them. No one dared. That was the moment I realized Grayvale Hollow was already gone. I don't know how long I stood at that window, hand pressed against the glass, watching the fog swirl and scrape against the house. It felt like it was breathing, pushing against the seams, looking for a way inside. Claire tugged my arm, snapping me out of it. "Dan," she whispered sharply, "help me with the vents." I turned and saw her crouched by the heater, shoving rags into the metal grate. Her hands trembled as she worked. Emily sat cross-legged on the couch, clutching her stuffed rabbit so tight its seams strained. Jenny hovered by the door like she wanted to run, eyes darting from window to window. I forced myself to move. Duct tape screeched as I ripped it free, slapping strips across the seams of the windows, stuffing rags along the sills. Claire brought towels, blankets, anything she could find. We moved like we'd rehearsed it, even though we hadn't. Panic had turned into instinct. Outside, muffled sounds rose and fell. A baby cried from a nearby house. Someone shouted orders. Somewhere farther down the block, glass shattered, followed by a scream that cut off too quickly. The fog hissed louder, pressing closer. Jenny's voice cracked when she finally spoke. "We can't just sit here, right? What if it gets in?" Claire answered without looking up, her voice flat and tight. "If it gets in, we're already dead." That silenced Jenny. By late afternoon, the light had dimmed, though the sun hadn't set yet. The fog thickened, turning the sky into a gray lid. The neighborhood was buried under it. Every so often, I thought I saw shapes moving in the haze. People, maybe, or just the wind carrying it. But each time I squinted, it looked like the fog itself was shifting, curling around corners, slithering across the ground like liquid. The emergency alert kept looping from my phone until the battery gave up. The silence after was worse. Then came another voice. This one was rough and human, though still distorted, carried on a loudspeaker from somewhere outside. "Residents of Grayvale Hollow, this is Sheriff Dalton." I froze mid-tape, staring at Claire. She looked at me, just as still. Dalton's voice crackled on, echoing through the muffled air. "We have set up a safe location at the community center. If you can move, gather your family and come now. Bring what supplies you have. The community center will provide shelter until assistance arrives." Jenny stood upright immediately, eyes wide with hope. "See? They've got a plan. We can't stay locked in here, Dan. We'll suffocate or starve or—" "Quiet," I snapped, sharper than I meant. My heart was hammering. I thought of the teens in the street, The blisters, the screams. I thought of the fog pressing against our windows like a living thing. He wants us to walk through that? Claire chewed her lip, glancing at Emily, then back at me. If it's safer there. She trailed off, her face pale, her hands gripping the edge of a chair. Another voice shouted faintly outside, maybe Dalton's deputy. This is temporary. Stay calm. Help is coming. But the words didn't sound convincing. They sounded like a man trying not to fall apart. We didn't move. We sat together in the dim light, every crack sealed, every breath shallow. The fog pressed on, licking at the edges of the house. An hour passed, maybe more. My watch had stopped working. Jenny paced, muttering under her breath. Emily dozed off with her rabbit, though her little body twitched in uneasy sleep. Claire leaned against me, whispering, "What do we do, Dan? We can't stay like this forever." Before I could answer, shouting erupted outside. Desperate, frantic. I crept to the window, peeled back a corner of the taped blanket just enough to see. A man staggered down the street, clutching a shopping bag. His face was mottled red, skin raw like a sunburn gone wrong. He coughed, doubling over, blood spraying from his mouth. He collapsed to his knees right in front of our yard. The bag split open, cans of food spilling across the pavement. He looked up at me. His eyes were white, clouded, but I swear he saw me. His lips moved soundlessly. Then his body jerked, twisted, and stilled. The fog curled over him like a blanket, swallowing him whole. I stumbled back from the window, gagging, my throat raw. Claire gripped my arm. Jenny covered her mouth. Emily stirred, murmuring, "Daddy?" in her sleep. The smell seeped through, even with all our sealing, a sour, acrid stench that made our eyes water. I knew then we couldn't last long like this. Our house wasn't airtight. None of them were. That night, the fog made itself at home against our walls. The air grew heavy, every breath thick and stinging. Our lungs rasped with each inhale. Jenny coughed until her face went red. Emily whimpered in her sleep, clawing at her throat. Somewhere out there, Dalton's loudspeaker barked again, his words blurred by static. "Stay together. No one go outside alone. Help is coming." But the desperation in his tone betrayed him. He was trying to believe it himself. By morning, our food was still intact, but the air felt worse. I caught the smell of rot when I leaned too close to the window, like meat left in the sun, and beneath it faintly came another smell, sweet, sickly, human. Mark Henderson pounded on our door just after dawn, his voice muffled but commanding. "Mercer, you hear Dalton last night? We're regrouping at the community center. You stay here, you're as good as dead." Claire looked at me with wide eyes, torn between terror and hope. Emily clutched my sleeve. Jenny whispered fiercely, "We can't stay here, Dan." I hesitated. Every instinct screamed to keep the door shut. But the air inside was growing harder to breathe. The duct tape peeled at the corners. I knew Mark was right, as much as I hated it. I opened the door just enough to look at him. He wore a bandana tied tight around his mouth and nose, goggles over his eyes, a makeshift mask that looked more like desperation than protection. His skin was flushed, sweat dripping down his temples. "Move fast, Mercer." The fog coiled around his boots, curling inside the crack of my door. My throat burned immediately. I slammed it shut again, coughing. Claire pressed her face into her sleeve, tears streaking her cheeks. I didn't want to go. God help me, I didn't. But the choice was gone. The house was already losing. The air was already killing us. By the time we left, the street was a graveyard. Doors hung open. Toys lay abandoned in yards. A car sat idling with its doors open, fog spilling across the seats. The driver slumped motionless at the wheel. The teens' bodies were gone, dissolved into the haze. We moved fast, following the muffled sound of Dalton's loudspeaker. Claire carried Emily, who coughed weakly against her shoulder. Jenny clutched a kitchen knife like it was worth a damn. My hand never left the crowbar I'd grabbed from the garage. The fog wrapped around us, thick and choking, searing every breath. My skin prickled where it touched. Emily whimpered, face buried in Claire's coat. Every step felt like it dragged us deeper into hell. The community center loomed ahead, lit faintly through the haze. Figures waved us inside. The gym doors slammed shut behind us, sealing out the fog. For the first time since it began, I thought we might have a chance. I was wrong. The community center gym was packed, the air thick with sweat, fear, and something else I couldn't place, like damp concrete and copper. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, their glow jittery, throwing shadows that seemed to twitch when no one moved. Every sound echoed, coughs, murmurs, the squeak of shoes on polished wood. We were herded in with other families, neighbors I recognized but had never spoken to. Kids Emily's age clutching stuffed toys, teenagers pale and wide-eyed, couples whispering frantically to each other. The doors slammed shut behind us, and for a moment the silence was almost unbearable. Then Sheriff Dalton appeared near the front, standing on a small platform where basketball teams usually posed for photos. He looked different, unshaven, eyes bloodshot, his uniform wrinkled and stained. A megaphone dangled from his hand. "Listen up," he barked, voice cracking halfway through. "We're safe in here. The fog can't get through the seals. As long as we stay calm, ration supplies, and keep order, we'll be fine until outside help arrives." The words echoed too much. They didn't feel steady. They felt like he was reciting lines to himself. Mark Henderson stood near him, arms crossed, jaw set. He looked like he was back in uniform, even though he wasn't wearing one. Military posture, scanning every face like we were recruits he didn't trust. Claire kept Emily close to her chest, rubbing her back every time she coughed. Jenny stood near the wall, eyes darting between Dalton and Mark. I stayed still, forcing myself to look calm though my insides were knotted. Dalton went on. "We've got water stored here, but food's limited. Share what you brought. Nobody takes more than their share. We'll get through this together." Murmurs rippled. Some nodded, others looked away. A few people clutched their bags tighter. Mr. O'Connor, the old man from across the street, was there too, slumped on a folding chair. His face was gray, his hands trembling. When his gaze met mine, he just shook his head slowly, as if to say, "This is pointless." Pastor Raymond was there, of course, his collar loose, eyes wild. He whispered to a knot of followers, his words too low to catch, but his expression feverish. The first night was chaos. Families spread blankets on the floor, children whined from hunger, adults argued about who had what. Dalton tried to keep order, but his voice cracked more each time he raised it. Around midnight, while most of us tried to sleep in the restless dark, a sound jolted me awake. Footsteps scuffing against the floor, the squeak of the gym doors. I sat up just in time to see a man slip through a crack as the doors closed behind him. "Where the hell's he going?" I whispered. Mark saw it too. He didn't shout, didn't try to stop him. He just watched, jaw tight, eyes narrow. Minutes dragged. Whispers spread through the gym as people stirred, realizing someone had left. The fog outside pressed against the windows like grease, and I prayed I wouldn't hear what I knew I would. It came sooner than I expected. A scream, long, raw, tearing through the air. Everyone sat bolt upright. Emily clutched me so hard her nails dug into my arm. The scream gurgled into coughing, then choking, then silence. The gym doors burst open. The man staggered back inside, collapsing onto the floor. His skin was red, blistering, lips swollen black. His eyes rolled, foam bubbling from his mouth. He clawed at the floor as if he could dig through it. The smell hit next, like burning rubber mixed with rotting meat. He convulsed once, twice, then vomited blood that spattered across the polished floor, steaming faintly. He tried to scream again, but only managed a wet, rattling gasp before his body gave out. Silence fell, except for the sobbing of a child in the corner. Dalton rushed forward, shouting, "Stay back! Nobody touch him!" But his voice wavered, his hands shaking as he stood over the body. Mark stepped up beside him, arms crossed, face unreadable. "That's what happens," he growled. "That's what the fog does. You step out there, you're dead. Simple as that." Pastor Raymond raised his hands suddenly, his voice booming. "Do you see? Do you see what happens when we turn from God? The Lord has cast his judgment as smoke and fire. We must repent before more of us are taken." Some nodded, murmuring prayers, but others shouted at him to shut up. Arguments flared, people yelling about food, about the fog, about whether Dalton knew what the hell he was doing. Emily buried her face against my chest. Claire whispered, "Dan, this isn't safe. None of this is safe." She was right. But where else could we go? Dalton finally snapped, shouting through the megaphone until his voice broke. "Quiet! Everyone quiet. Nobody leaves again. Nobody. You stay put, or you die like him." His words echoed against the walls, hanging heavy in the air. That night, the corpse lay in the corner, covered with a tarp someone had found in the supply closet. The stench seeped through anyway, sour and thick, clinging to our throats. No one slept. By morning, the gym looked worse. People huddled in small groups, whispering. Kids cried for food. Adults argued in hoarse voices. Mark paced like a caged dog, barking at anyone who wasted water or took too much space. Pastor Raymond's group prayed louder, some rocking back and forth, muttering about Sodom and Gomorrah, about fire and brimstone. Dalton sat slumped in a folding chair, staring at the floor. His badge gleamed faintly in the light, but the man wearing it looked hollowed out, his authority hanging by a thread. I felt the walls closing in, the air growing staler by the hour. My head throbbed, my chest tight. Every cough made me wonder if the fog had already found a way inside. Jenny tried to sound tough, muttering to me, "We should get out of here, Dan. Find another place, anywhere but here." But her hands shook as she said it, and her eyes were red from crying. Claire kept silent most of the day, except to soothe Emily, but I caught her staring at the sealed windows, her expression distant, as if imagining them breaking. The corpse was dragged outside by Mark and 2 others that evening. They gagged as they carried it, the skin already peeling, the smell unbearable. The doors were unsealed just long enough for them to shove it into the fog, then slammed shut again. Everyone coughed and wheezed for an hour afterward, the air tainted by what leaked in. That was when I realized we were trapped in more ways than one. The fog wasn't the only thing killing us. It was in the way Dalton's hands shook, the way Mark's eyes hardened, the way Pastor Raymond's voice whipped people into fevered hysteria. It was in the whispers of hunger, in the glares exchanged over scraps of bread, in the silence that followed every cough. The fog was outside. But it was inside too, crawling into our heads, rotting us from the inside out. I held Claire and Emily close that night, Jenny curled up nearby, and I told myself we'd survive. I didn't believe it. Not anymore. And that was only the second night. The third day bled into the fourth without much difference, just the air growing heavier, the coughing louder, and the food piles smaller. Time inside the gym stretched, sticky and suffocating, like we were trapped in the belly of something waiting to digest us. The fluorescent lights overhead hummed and flickered, sometimes cutting out for seconds that felt like hours. When they sputtered back to life, I always caught people staring at the doors or windows, as if daring themselves to run. Emily's cheeks had gone pale, her lips dry and cracked. She barely touched the crackers we had left. her throat too sore. Claire tried to coax her, whispering soft encouragement, but I could see the fear in her eyes. Each cough from Emily stabbed deeper than any knife. Jenny grew restless, pacing the gym like a cornered animal. She snapped at little things, someone brushing against her, a kid crying too loudly. When I pulled her aside, tried to calm her, she muttered, "We can't just sit here, Dan. We'll rot like them. We need medicine. We need more food. I can get it." I told her no. I told her what the fog did, reminded her of the man who had staggered back in, skin sloughing off. But her jaw tightened. She was just a teenager trying to prove she wasn't useless, and that made her dangerous. That night, while the rest of us huddled in uneasy sleep, Jenny slipped out. I didn't notice until I woke to Claire shaking me, panic in her whisper. "Dan, she's gone." I bolted upright, scanning the gym. Emily stirred weakly in her blanket. Jenny's spot was empty. By the time I reached the doors, it was already too late. A commotion rose outside. Shouts, gasps, then pounding fists as people dragged her back in. Jenny collapsed onto the floor, coughing violently, her lips darkened, skin blistering at the edges of her face and hands. She screamed, clawing at her throat, blood bubbling at the corners of her mouth. Claire pulled Emily close, covering her eyes, but I couldn't look away. Jenny writhed, her fingernails tearing her skin raw as if she could scratch out the poison burning inside her. Her voice cracked as she begged, I just wanted to help," before it drowned in a wet, choking gurgle. She died that night, shivering and gasping, surrounded by whispers and the stink of blood. The gym fell into silence after, broken only by Pastor Raymond's voice rising in a triumphant wail. "The Lord's wrath spares no one who defies his will." She stepped into the smoke of damnation, and he struck her down. "Repent, repent, or be taken next." Some wept with him, others shouted at him to shut up. I wanted to strangle him, shut his mouth before Emily had to hear another word, but Claire's grip on my wrist held me back. By morning, Jenny's body was gone, dragged out the same way as the others. The smell clung to the gym anyway, metallic and rancid, burrowing into our clothes, our skin. Mr. O'Connor broke next. He had been quiet since day one, sitting on his folding chair with a blanket around his shoulders. That morning, he stood up slowly, his joints creaking. He looked older than I'd ever seen him, older than anyone could be. He shuffled to the doors, ignoring Dalton's shout, ignoring Mark's barked warning. He turned to us only once, his eyes tired and empty. "I buried my wife 10 years ago," he rasped. "I'm not doing this again. Not like this." Before anyone could stop him, he pulled the doors open and stepped into the fog. We watched him dissolve into it, literally dissolve. His silhouette blurred, sagged, then vanished, as if the air itself swallowed him whole. A woman screamed. Emily whimpered. Claire buried her face in my chest. Dalton slammed the doors shut, his face pale, his hands shaking so badly he dropped his megaphone. He didn't pick it back up. That was the day we stopped being people trapped together. That was the day the gym became something else, something like a cage. Mark took over more and more, barking orders, rationing food with a soldier's cruelty. When a man tried to sneak an extra biscuit for his daughter, Mark dragged him to the front and beat him until his face was unrecognizable. Then he stood over the broken man and declared, "This is what happens when rules are broken. This is survival. Anyone else want to test it?" Nobody did. Dalton sat in his chair, silent, staring at the blood staining the gym floor. His badge caught the light again, but it meant nothing now. He wasn't the sheriff anymore. He was just another man waiting to break. Pastor Raymond's flock grew louder, their prayers turning into chants. They huddled together, rocking, whispering about purification. One of them, a thin woman with hollow eyes, stood suddenly and cried out, "The fog is God's breath. Let it take us, cleanse us." Before anyone could stop her, she sprinted to the side door, yanked it open, and flung herself outside. The fog rushed in behind her, spilling across the floor like liquid fire. Screams erupted as it burned through the first row of people. A man stumbled, his skin blistering before my eyes, his body crumpling as if the fog itself had melted him. Another clawed at his face, coughing blood that sprayed across the wall. Chaos swallowed the gym. People shoved, trampled, screamed. Emily cried into my chest, her little body shaking violently. Claire dragged us toward the back, trying to shield her. Mark roared over the noise, firing Dalton's gun into the ceiling. The blast echoed like thunder, silencing everyone. The fog was pushed back, the door resealed, but the damage was done. Bodies lay twisted on the floor, some twitching, some still. Blood pooled on the polished wood, seeping into the cracks. The smell was indescribable, acid and iron and rot all at once. Pastor Raymond dropped to his knees, his voice rising in hysteria. "Do you see now? The unworthy are cast into his smoke. The faithful must rejoice." I wanted to kill him, I swear I did. But all I could do was hold Claire and Emily, whispering promises I didn't believe. That night, the gym was silent except for coughs, sobs, and the occasional prayer. The lights flickered again, plunging us into shadow for agonizing seconds at a time. Every time they came back, it felt like fewer of us were left. The air inside was getting worse. The seals leaked, faint, but enough. My throat burned with every breath. Emily's cough deepened, wet and rattling. Claire looked at me with hollow eyes, silently begging me to fix something I couldn't fix. Mark stalked the gym like a wolf, his eyes sharp, his gun at his side. Dalton sat in his chair, head in his hands, muttering. Pastor Raymond's group prayed louder than ever, swaying, whispering, waiting for God's smoke to take them. I lay awake on the cold floor, Emily curled against me, Claire's hand gripping mine so hard it hurt. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the lights, the rasp of sick lungs, the faint hiss of fog pressing against the walls. I knew then we wouldn't last. Not in here, not like this. The fog wasn't waiting outside anymore. It was already in us. And sooner or later, it would win. By the fifth night, the gymnasium didn't feel like a shelter anymore. It felt like a tomb. The air inside was stale and thick, every breath rasping in our throats. Seals of duct tape and plastic peeled at the corners of the windows, hissing faintly as if the fog whispered against them. The smell of sweat, blood, and sickness clung to every surface. People coughed in ragged unison, their lungs rotting inside them. Emily lay curled against Claire, shivering even under 2 blankets. Her cough had turned deeper, wetter. Every time she hacked, blood flecked her lips. Claire brushed it away with trembling hands, whispering soothing words she didn't believe. Dalton hadn't moved from his chair in 2 days. His badge hung loose on his chest, his eyes sunken, his lips cracked. He stared at the floor, mumbling to himself. Once I caught a phrase. "Not my fault. Not my town. Not my fault." Mark Henderson had taken full command. He stalked the gym like a predator, barking orders, enforcing rationing with an iron fist. His voice cut through the air like a whip. "Half rations from now on. Anyone caught stealing will be punished." The word punished hung heavy in the room. That evening, a man, thin, desperate, with hollow cheeks, was caught sneaking an extra biscuit for his daughter. Mark dragged him to the center of the gym by his collar. The daughter screamed, clutching at her father's leg, but Mark shoved her away. "You all need to see this," Mark bellowed, gun in hand. "If we let one man take more than his share, we all die. There is no mercy out here. Only order." The man begged, hands clasped. "Please, it was for my little girl. She hasn't eaten." Mark didn't let him finish. He pressed the barrel of Dalton's pistol against the man's forehead. Dalton didn't even flinch. He just stared at the floor, muttering. The gunshot cracked through the gym, echoing like thunder. Blood sprayed across the polished wood, hot and metallic. The man collapsed, twitching once before lying still. Screams erupted. The daughter shrieked, clawing at her father's body until others pulled her away. Some people sobbed openly. Others stood frozen, wide-eyed. Mark raised the smoking pistol high. This is survival. This is the price of breaking order. Remember it well. I clutched Emily tighter, shielding her face, though I knew she'd heard it all. Claire buried her head against my shoulder, her body shaking. My stomach churned with rage and helplessness. Pastor Raymond seized the moment, his voice booming like a prophet. Do you see how sin devours us? The Lord punishes thieves and liars just as the fog punishes the unfaithful. Bow your heads, repent, or be struck down next. His followers chanted, rocking back and forth, eyes wild. A few others joined in, too broken or terrified to resist. The gym fractured further that night. Some clung to Mark's rules, convinced his cruelty would keep them alive. Others flocked to Raymond, surrendering to the idea that the fog was divine punishment. The rest of us just tried to survive in the cracks, silent and afraid. I watched them all with growing horror, realizing the fog wasn't the only thing killing us. We were killing ourselves. The next morning, another disaster struck. One of Raymond's zealots, a young man with sunken eyes and trembling hands, screamed suddenly, leaping to his feet. I won't wait to rot. I'll meet the Lord myself. Before anyone could stop him, he rushed to the gym's side door and flung it open. The fog exploded inside like a living wave, curling across the floor, searing the nearest rows of people. Chaos erupted instantly. People screamed, shoved, trampled each other in a blind panic. A woman fell, her face sizzling as the fog kissed her skin, her screams shredding into gurgles. Another man clawed at his throat, blood pouring down his chin. I grabbed Claire and Emily, dragging them back, shoving through the chaos. Blood sprayed across my shirt. Emily cried against my chest, coughing violently. Mark roared above the noise, firing into the ceiling again. Seal it! Seal the goddamn door! He and two others shoved it closed, duct taping it while others gagged and retched in the tainted air. When the fog was forced back out, the floor was slick with blood and bodies. Some twitched, still alive but barely. Most were still. The stench was indescribable. Burned flesh, iron, and rot mixed into a choking miasma. Pastor Raymond fell to his knees, arms raised high, his voice exulting. The Lord has chosen his children. The wicked are purged. I wanted to tear his throat out, but Emily's weak coughing held me still. By nightfall, the survivors sat in stunned silence, broken. Dalton had curled into himself completely, rocking in his chair, whispering gibberish. Mark sat at the front with his pistol on his lap, his eyes scanning the room like a wolf guarding territory. Raymond and his flock prayed louder, filling the silence with their madness. Claire leaned into me, her face pale, whispering so softly only I heard, "We can't stay here, Dan. Emily's not going to make it, not in this place. We need to get her out." Her words hit me harder than Mark's bullet had hit that man. She was right. Emily's cough was worse, her body weaker each day. The gym wasn't a shelter anymore, it was a slaughterhouse. I nodded, though fear clawed at me. "The school," I whispered back. "Dalton said they had generators. Stockpiles. If it's true..." Claire's eyes glistened with tears. "Then we go. Tonight. Before Mark notices." That night, as bodies were dragged to the far side of the gym and Raymond's flock wailed their prayers, I made my choice. We would leave, even if it meant walking into the fog. I don't know how long I sat there, clutching Claire's hand under the blanket, listening to Raymond's zealots chant their madness while Mark prowled like a predator. Time was broken in that place. Hours crawled and days blurred. The only thing that stayed sharp was Emily's cough, each one rattling like broken glass in her chest. I kept telling myself, we leave tonight. We leave before she can't walk at all. When the gym finally quieted, half the survivors collapsed in restless sleep, the others whispering prayers to a God I didn't believe was listening. I leaned close to Claire. "Now," I breathed. Her eyes locked with mine, and for the first time in days, there was a glimmer of something in them. Not hope. Hope had died the night Jenny came back burned black. But determination. She nodded once. I woke Emily gently, whispering, "Shh, baby girl. We're going somewhere better, somewhere safe." She blinked at me with fever-glazed eyes, but wrapped her arms around my neck when I lifted her. She felt so light in my arms, bones under skin. We moved slowly, silently, weaving between sleeping bodies. The smell of unwashed flesh and death clung to the air. Claire carried a small bundle of food we'd hidden, 2 crackers, a half-empty bottle of water. All that stood between survival and nothing. At the back of the gym, near the supply closet, a side door led out into the alleys. I'd checked it earlier, seen the tape frayed but not yet breached. If we moved quickly, stayed low, maybe we could make it to the school. My hand closed around the handle. Claire's fingers pressed into my arm. I glanced back. She was pale, trembling, but ready. Emily's head rested on my shoulder, her breath shallow. I pulled. The door creaked open. The hiss of fog poured in instantly, acrid and metallic, searing the back of my throat. Claire helped me tape a plastic sheet across her face as we stepped into the night. The fog hung like a living wall, thick and pale, crawling across the pavement in heavy waves. It burned my eyes instantly. Every breath was fire. We ran, alley to alley, crouched low, Emily clinging to me with every step. My arms screamed with the weight, but I didn't dare let her go. Claire staggered beside me, her face streaked with sweat and tears. The town was unrecognizable. Cars sat abandoned in driveways, their windows melted from the inside. Corpses lay fused to the ground, their skin bubbled and split, fingers clawing blindly at the fog that had eaten them alive. A dog's skeleton slumped against a fence, patches of fur hanging like wet paper. Everywhere, silence, except for the hiss of the fog pressing against walls, licking at cracks. We were halfway to the school when I heard him. "Mercer." The voice cut through the fog like a knife. Mark Henderson stepped out of the haze ahead, pistol gleaming in his hand. His face was twisted, eyes red-rimmed, jaw clenched. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in days, but his grip on the gun was steady. "You thought you'd sneak away?" he spat. "Undermine me again? You're not taking anyone. You're not leaving. We survive together, or we don't survive at all." Claire stepped in front of me, shielding Emily. "Please, Mark. She's dying. You've seen it. Just let us go." His laugh was low, bitter. "You think I care about your brat? Weak links kill us all. She's already dead weight." Rage exploded in me, hot and blinding. "Say one more word about her," I growled, "and I swear—" He raised the gun. The shot came before I could move. A deafening crack split the fog. Claire gasped, staggered, and crumpled forward into my arms. Time shattered. I screamed her name, clutching her as blood bloomed warm against my hands. Her eyes fluttered, lips trembling, whispering something I couldn't hear. Then she was gone. Just gone. Her body limp, her head lolling against my chest. Mark stepped closer, pistol raised for me now, but Emily's scream pierced the fog, high and broken. "Mommy!" Something in that cry stopped him, if only for a second. And in that second I lunged. I crashed into him with everything I had, the pistol clattering to the pavement. We struggled in the fog, fists and teeth and rage. His hands closed around my throat, squeezing until black spots swam in my vision. I clawed at his face, my nails raking his skin. He spat blood into my eyes. Then my hand found the pistol. I didn't think. I pulled the trigger. The recoil slammed through my arm. Mark's head snapped back, a hole opening between his eyes. He crumpled into the fog, his blood hissing as it touched the ground. I fell back, gasping, chest heaving. Claire lay still at my side. Emily sobbed into my neck, shaking violently. I couldn't stop to grieve. Not now. Not here. I lifted her again, ignoring the fire in my lungs, and staggered toward the school. It loomed through the fog like a fortress, windows boarded, doors sealed with plastic and tape. I banged on the entrance with the last of my strength, screaming hoarsely. "Help! For God's sake, let us in!" The door cracked open. A pale face appeared, eyes hollow but alive. A survivor. He yanked us inside, slamming it shut again. The school was dimly lit by flickering lanterns, the air only slightly less foul than outside. Maybe 24 people huddled there, thinner, sicker, but breathing. They stared at me with suspicion, pity, fear. I collapsed against the wall, Emily in my arms. She coughed weakly, her skin hot and clammy. Someone offered a bottle of water. I poured a trickle into her mouth, watching her lips tremble as she swallowed. But I could see it in her eyes. She was slipping away. That night, as the school groaned against the weight of the fog outside, people whispered about rescue. They said the military was coming, that hazmat suits and helicopters would break through any day now, that we just had to hold on. I didn't believe them. But I stayed by Emily's side, stroking her hair, whispering stories about summer days in Grayvale Hollow, about ice cream trucks and swimming pools and her mother's laugh. Anything to keep her here, if only a little longer. The next morning, the pounding came. Heavy boots, voices muffled through masks. "Stay where you are. Don't open the doors. We're coming in." The soldiers broke through with axes, their hazmat suits glowing under floodlights. Gas masks hid their faces, their voices mechanical. "Stay sealed until we secure the area." They moved quickly, strapping masks onto survivors, dragging bodies out. I stumbled forward with Emily in my arms, begging, "Please, she needs a doctor. She's just a child." One of them pulled her from me, checking her pulse. His eyes behind the mask softened, then fell. "I'm sorry." The words gutted me. My knees buckled, the world spinning. I screamed until my throat tore, until soldiers dragged me out into the night air filtered through their machines. Grayvale Hollow was gone. Streets filled with bodies, homes silent and rotting, families erased. Out of thousands, only a handful of us emerged behind those armored trucks. Emily didn't. Claire didn't. Only me. Now I sit here, weeks later, writing these words because I have to. Because people need to know. They warned us not to breathe, not to open the doors, not to believe we were safe. We didn't listen. That's why only a few of us walked out of Grayvale Hollow alive. And I'm not sure surviving was the better fate.